All right, mic check, good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
All right, welcome to another edition of the CWB Association Podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as you can tell from my introduction, we've been doing podcasts all day here at the NASCC show. A little stumbly. Normally, I have that super smooth intro, but I'm here with Wayne from the Iron Workers. You guys are just down the line here from us, and you guys are doing great stuff. So, Wayne Cresap from the Iron Workers, you're the district rep of safety and health. Welcome to the show.
Hey, appreciate it, Max. Enjoy the opportunity to be here.
Awesome. So, what's going on with the Iron Workers? You guys are going crazy.
It's a wild time. It's a wild time. So, yeah, we got a lot of work going on. We could always use more work or more workers. So we definitely could use as many members as we can get to come back and do some work all over both actually the U.S. and Canada. There's tons of work opportunities. And obviously here in the States with the passage of that infrastructure bill, that's a whole ton of work. But aside from that, there's tons of capital work. We have actually, our union signatory contractors are actually having to turn down big work opportunities because they're just not sure they can staff these projects.
And that's never a great position to be in.
It's a very frustrating.
Yeah. Let's back up a little bit and let's talk about Wayne the person.
Sure.
You know, not the myth and not the legend, but Wayne the person. So where are you from, Wayne?
So I'm from Central Ohio, and I've actually just recently been organized with the Iron Workers back in 2019. So my book number is really high. A member of the Shopman's Regional Local Union number 851 in Cleveland. But I actually have 27 years of experience in safety and health. My background is actually in environmental and hazardous materials management, and I had an opportunity to come out once I finished school, had my education, and all that super fun money started drying up with all those hazmat sites, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And happened to have a local contractor association in Cleveland reach out to me and say, hey, we're looking for a safety person. And, lo and behold, it worked out as an opportunity to become the safety director for that local contractor association. And not long after that, I moved down to the hallway to a larger general contractor association. I had a great mentor that helped take me under his wing, give me some education on the construction side.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because, you would go, in the hazmat world, you wanted as much personal protective equipment on as you could. If the standard operating procedure said 3 pair of gloves, I'd put on 4 because I didn't want this stuff on me.
Yeah.
And then you come out to a construction project and you got to fight people to wear a damn hard hat. It's ridiculous. But that was, again, 25 years ago, 27 years ago. And now, from that training and that program, I then went to work for a national trade association that was based in Arlington, Virginia. Worked very closely with all the building trades there, and a lot of contractors that did industrial maintenance work and construction. And when I was there, I was doing some training programs for the Iron Workers as part of their safety director training course. And they just, things just seemed to click, and they were like, boy, we'd really like to have you come over and work with us. So I know it's a long story to get there,
it's a great path.
But it's a heck of an opportunity to be able to take that. And that's one thing. You didn't have to fight iron workers to wear hard hats. They were always good about that.
Yeah,
some other things not so good, but
it's weird when you get used to being in a safe environment, because welding is just by the nature of the material a dangerous material to work with. It's heavy, it's sharp, generally it can be hot, and it can move very quickly, and things, if it does let go, it goes big, right?
Absolutely.
And as a normal worker in a steel industry, you are generally fairly aware of the dangers around you, and you try not to skip PPE. Like, I've been in the business 30 years now. In the beginning, I'd say maybe it was a little bit more cavalier, but I've seen fingers get lopped off. I've been around 2 work site deaths in my life, which is a terrible experience to go through. And those, and I'm thinking these are late 80s, early 90s. After that, it felt like kind of people had enough in general, and by the end of the 90s there was a focus on safety where people just accepted it, like this is just part of the job.
Yeah, there was a big shift in how that was handled. You know, it's funny that you mentioned, you know, your experience with this, because the way I got started into safety, actually in the hazmat side, we were on a specific site, and it was a gentleman actually had run a chrome plating facility out of his house for Harley Davidsons.
Man.
So
That's
he
a
had
chromium
acids, bases,
oxide, yeah.
exactly. He had all this stuff, and I'm talking out of a house, a residential area, where he basically gutted the inside of the house, and he had 55-gallon drums, at least 130 drums sitting in the house that were all over the place, and they shut them down, and then it became a cleanup. So we came in to do the work. Well, in order to get some of these drums out, when we were doing, after we did all the testing and the bulk containment, we had to get them out, to move these drums out of the building, out of this house. So there was an overhead garage door, just like any old garage door in a house, except this place had been vacant for a long time. There was drywall hanging down and different things like that. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, every time I tried to move the garage door, that drywall and everything was in the way because it was blocking the track. So I'm like, well, I'm starting pulling stuff and trying to get down. And the safety guy comes walking in. And we're all in type B with SCBAs, the moon suits and everything. And he's like, Wayne, stop. You can't do that. And I'm like, no, I'm just getting this down so we can do. Wayne, you don't know what's up there and what's behind that. I'm like, it's nothing. We'll get it. And, you know, you can see me, I really, you know, can't jump, can't move, but it seemed like it was at least a 40-inch vertical to get up there and pull this. I pulled this sheet of plywood or of drywall. And as I yanked on this drywall while I was up there and pulled, all this stuff came down right on top of the safety guy.
Yeah.
You know, so he's like this. And actually, you know, seeing that, him react in a fearful way and you know, ducking and turning.
You immediately feel terrible.
I felt horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. And, you know, of course, then I was the one that caused it. Even to this day, when I see him, I still apologize because it stuck with me. But then, you know, obviously written up, reprimanded. And then the worst part was the next day I had to give the safety meeting. So
this is
what to
I
do.
did.
Exactly. And I had to own it. And he made me own it. So I share all of that because you have, you know, that similar experience. And the thing that is so heartbreaking is when you see a tragedy happen on the job site, you know, the lives of those men and women, our brothers and sisters who are out there that witnessed it, let alone the family who is suffering from it. Everybody else, there will never be the same again.
Everyone
they
down
will
the line.
remember those days. They will remember that day. And as a safety person, when I go to these different job sites, you know, a lot of contractors and again, the pride that we have in our industry is like, I built that, right? I built that. You know, all of it by yourself? No, but you have that pride. It's a pride that you did that. And, you know, it's a monument to what was done and the skills of our craft people to be able to put this work and to get this job or this building or this bridge or whatever in place. But there's so many other jobs where there have been a serious loss of life and a catastrophic incident. And those are also monuments to those who were lost. And it's powerful to go by. And no matter what, even some of these jobs have been over 20 years now where I know that there had been a fatality. And I still say a prayer every time I go by there.
Yeah,
you know,
you think about it forever.
And you think about it. It doesn't leave you.
Yeah, and I tell these stories to students when I was teaching in the college systems. Years ago, I had this old guy I used to work with, Terry. He's passed away now. And he was one of my mentors as a fabricator when I decided to go into the fabricating stream. And he was a fantastic older gentleman who used to really take me under his wing and show me stuff. And we were talking about safety once, and I was saying, these safety rules. And he goes, you know what? Everything's going to change for you when you decide to change it from safety rules to safety skill, because you care about skill and you want to be a better welder because of the skill. You want to be a better fabricator because of the skill. Well, you need to be a better worker because safety is also a skill.
Amen.
Don't think about it as something you need to hurdle. Think about it as something you need to master. And I was like, that is genius.
That's a great way to phrase that.
Yeah, because it's just something you need to do, so you might as well get good at it.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the projects that we're undertaking right now is what we call a foreman fall protection training course, where we're trying to help. You know, we recognize, you know, unfortunately, because of a lot of the incidents that have happened, we recognize that especially when you're doing steel erection activities, right? There's no way to engineer out the hazard because we got to work at elevation. There's no way to put guardrails up because there's nothing where to go. There's nothing else to,
there's zero
you can't
tie-off
sub it out.
times, yeah.
And there's oftentimes there's nowhere to tie off
Yeah.
to. So, you're trying to come up with different systems to be able to use it. And, we put this in, we look at these things, and yet how many times do we have people that walk by and see somebody up there and they're not using the equipment the right way? Or they're up there and the leg straps on their harness are dangling down and it's not even hooked up. And so, they got away with it today and nobody said anything. And then tomorrow that happens. And now next week, and a month from now. And then eventually something happens.
Will happen, yeah.
And now it's like, well, why didn't we stop it the first time instead of the 100th time when we really should have taken care of it before?
Yeah.
And so part of this class that we're working on is to try to help educate our foreman as a supervisor. It's your role, your responsibility to identify these things and make a course correction so that our members are still going home safely at the end of the day. And yeah, they might be a little butt sore about it because, they got correction, but they're still alive to be sore about it.
Yeah, and there's no argument there, really. Right. And how many whoopses or uh-ohs do you go through before it becomes something bad, right?
Yeah.
And we've all been in those situations, especially as tradespeople, where it's like, whoops, I just about clipped my finger, or I just about did that, and you kind of think about it for a second. But some people aren't lucky, and they lose the finger, and they lose the digit or the eye or whatever it is. And that's even with safety gear, right? Because steel is steel, right?
Yeah.
So
there's no forgiveness.
No, there is none.
And that's the thing, because you're like, hey, this is a last ditch kind of a thing. And when it comes to PPE, all these other things didn't work. That's the last resort. And it's all got to be worn right. It's got to be on the whole time. It's got to be used correctly. Because if you fail with any one of those things, it's not fit correctly. It's not worth a damn.
Yeah.
And so that's part of that aspect of it. But what you mentioned, the skill and the craftsmanship that goes along. So we were, I'm sure you've seen the Iron Workers mock-up structures at different training centers around the U.S. and Canada, and so we did one here a couple of weeks ago in Toledo, Ohio, with Local 55, and they built the structure. They had the mock-up in place, and we were doing, in addition to classroom, we had the mock-up to do some hands-on and do some things and. What's right with this picture, what's wrong with this, and have people go around and look at it. And, we actually, on the detail, we left a few bolts loose.
Okay.
Deliberately.
Yeah.
And our foreman walked by and they're like, hey, that, they picked it up in 20 seconds, Max. I mean, like, they just walked by and they're like, that's not, they didn't torque that down, and yet they turn around and we have a guy deliberately walk by with a harness on, with their leg straps wide open and hanging, and they didn't say a thing. And we're like, this is why we're here. This is why we're trying to teach. Yeah, we can identify this skill on the quality side, but there's also the skill over here on the safety side that, again, you need to master.
Yeah.
So I really like what you shared with that.
Now, in terms of your career, I'm interested what you must have been like as a young boy, because, there's two ways to look at safety, right? So let's say I'm building a ramp to jump my bike off of, right?
Yep.
There's two ways to look at that in terms of safety. One is don't do it. And two is let's make sure the ramp is built well and get you a helmet.
Yeah. Well,
which one are you?
Here's the crazy. Well, so first off, I'm a firstborn. I'm the oldest of 5. So every hanger in my closet is the same direction. Okay, and the pants are in one area, the shirts are in an area. So that's.
I'm the firstborn too.
Okay,
You
get it. You get it. So I can't change that.
No.
But the other side is I also have a tendency to be kind of risk averse, where I'm like, okay, well, does that look safe? So let's build it safe. Let's make sure it's sturdy enough. And I was actually a pretty portly kid. So, if you remember the old Sears, you had the Huskies, the Husky size, and then there were the Sears
I've always
brand.
been in that section.
Yeah, the Sears brand, and you're like, God,
the legs are a different length.
Yeah, and it's like these things, they were so stiff, you were trying to wear them. It was like they were uncomfortable Carhartt before Carhartt, because once you get Carhartts, they're kind of stiff, but they eventually break in a little bit. But these things, they never broke in. It was like, like chainmail or something. But they never wore out either. But so any rate, so we, so that would be one of the things, but it was always, but the funny part, we never thought about helmets back then, as kids, it was just, a given. And yet today the culture has changed where, when we had backpacks, you'd put a backpack on one shoulder. Now you walk by any school and all the kids have it on both shoulders, right? They're wearing it correctly.
Yeah, they don't want to wreck their backs.
Right.
And meanwhile, we all complain about it.
Yeah. And you see kids nowadays, it's automatic. Put on the seatbelt, click. Put on on their bicycle, they put on the helmet, click. So yeah, I guess I would have been more on the risk averse side to making sure that everything was done and following through with the procedures. So a couple of things about safety people. For years my wife was like, "What do you do?" She's like, "It's something safety." People would ask her, "What's your husband do?" She was like, "I don't know. It's something safety." So let me try to paraphrase a little bit. So, she had a brother-in-law who was a nurse, and he was an emergency room nurse. And so, he was always in chaos dealing with, different casualties coming in and trying to help triage and handle that. And a lot of times they were construction related or industrial related and everything. And I said, well, as a safety person, I said, my job is to put my brother-in-law out of work. Because if I can implement a process and I can implement the procedures and I can have these things, then this stuff shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And I get very upset when something does happen because it means I failed. And I have a real hard time with failure.
Yeah.
Again, as a firstborn, right? So that's a certain challenge, but it's also part of taking pride in that to be able to have that happen. But it's hard to tell a grown man or a grown woman not to do something to hurt themselves. In a lot of cases, in spite of themselves. But it also has to be delivered in a way that is respectful and can be perceived as that. And also, we have to make sure that our brothers and sisters also are willing to accept that in the same manner and be willing to, even if they don't follow through with it, at least say, "Hey, thank you for thinking of me and my safety." Exactly.
Well,
and that's hard.
And it is hard because often, if you're witnessing a safety infraction or something that could be perceived as a safety infraction, I'll bet you $100 of donuts that's not the first time they did that. You just happened to be there at that moment, right?
Exactly.
So they have done this successfully without getting hurt, perhaps hundreds of times. So when you come in and say, "Hey, yo, stop, you could get hurt, this is dangerous," their automatic reaction, without saying it out loud, because they know they might get in trouble for saying it out loud and saying, they're not going to say, "Well, I've done this 300 times and nothing ever happened." They just say, "Oh, leave me alone, it's fine," or whatever. But they have created a sort of memory bank of
that
instances,
shortcut.
that it's never been wrong before. What's the problem, right?
Right. Well, that's part of the challenge with it, right? Because we do it and we call it, what do we call it? If we do it and then I do it wrong and then I teach you how to do it wrong, well, now we turn around and we go, "That's the industry practice," right? That's the standard industry practice.
Yeah.
Everybody does it this way.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I years ago, before I was working at the CWB, I used to be one of those guys. I like to write. So I went to university for philosophy, but then I became a welder. But I've always had this love of literature and writing. So I wrote an article about safety because it was, kind of just on my own personal experience with safety. And it was, the article was, safety rules are written in blood.
absolutely.
Right. And the ink is always fresh blood on a safety infraction because we tend to not, as humans, and it's sort of how we got to where we are, but it's something that we need to be aware of, is that we are risk takers as a species. We do like to push envelopes, and we do like to get past the whoopses and just get something done.
Right.
Now, but at some point, you can't blanket that statement across 7 billion people and say, go nuts. Like, we have to create boundaries, right?
Well, yeah, and it's also, again, based on your own risk tolerance, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, for you, jumping on a motorcycle and going, what is that, 150 kilometers an hour?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the
80
equivalent
miles.
here.
Yeah.
So, and cruising down the road and doing something like that, your risk tolerance might be way higher than somebody else's. We're like, well, I don't know. I've had stuff thrown in my eye, and man, that just hurts. So I don't want to, do that. So I might, actually think about putting on other things and protecting myself. Or maybe they don't like working at heights because that's something that they're just extremely uncomfortable with. So a lot of that varies by individual, and that's what's also a challenge, is trying to get a good team together, right? So if you're trying to get a gang, like a raising gang or your detail crew or anything like that together, or even in a fab shop, you'd like to have some diversity in your shop, and having different levels of risk tolerance in your team, because now you have a good blend. Because if you have everybody that's a high risk taker, who knows what that could end up like?
Well,
You might set the damn place on fire.
They'll just level up on each other, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, watch. Hey, hold my beer and watch this, right? That kind of stuff. But you run that risk of everybody going along those lines. So if you happen to have a blend of that, you would hope that as you work with that team that maybe it helps kind of balance each other out a little bit. So, you got your production guy or gal that's really going to get stuff done, but there might be somebody else here that may be a little more conservative and go, hey, let's rethink how we might want to do this so we don't have anybody.
And maybe they do the beam layout twice as fast as somebody else.
Exactly. And it works together based on those skill sets.
So in terms of what the ironworkers do, which is a wide range, and my life has mainly been in the welding and steel fab areas, and I've worked for the ironworkers many times, but never a paying member, sadly. Sorry, but I was a permit welder, and I really enjoyed doing the shutdown. So when I was teaching, I'd go do shutdowns in the summer. In Canada, it's like perfect timing, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed my time because I get to be back on the tools and back with a lot of the people that I've known over the years, because the community is quite tight, and it was great people. But there's a wide range of work that people maybe don't realize there is within the ironworkers. So, what would be some of the range of jobs?
It's unbelievable when you start to think about it. So, within the ironworkers, if you actually look at the full name of the ironworkers, right? International Association of Bridge, Structural, Ornamental, and Reinforcing Ironworkers. I mean, that right there hits a number of different elements, right?
Which each branches off.
And each one branches off into their own subsets.
Yeah.
So, we get into, obviously your structural, with all your structural steel buildings and rows and, things like that on the bridge side as well. And then you start getting into maybe some of the ornamental and reinforcing. So reinforcing, that's all of our rebar, rod work. Where you're out there and you carry, place, and tie, and you build up all these structures that put forms around it, pour concrete, and that's what keeps everything together, especially in a lot of times on our bridges and things. But there's other application for rebar as well.
Yeah.
A lot of buildings, you have your foundations are done or floors are done, have either rebar or mesh in them, and that's all got to be tied back into your structure to be able to help keep everything
together. And there's now a
together.
Welding code for rebar, which never used to exist.
Yeah. So and the thing is rebar is junk metal. So you bend it a couple of times, it's like a paper clip.
It's like crystal.
It snaps. Yeah. So people need to be aware of there's limitations with that. And then, we ornamental side, so that's fences. You've got handrails or different types of rails,
lattice,
stairways, lattice type work.
Yeah.
And then, ironworkers even get into some of the curtain wall, with like glass and glazing, and putting the framework together where the glass would actually go into that. And you see a lot of buildings now are all done with a lot of curtain wall applications where it's all just nice glass. It's real pretty and everything, but a lot of times it's ironworkers that help put that framework and everything in place. So, and that's just in the field, right? So you mentioned, on the fabrication side, and now we have fabrication shops all over North America that perform, a wide variety of work, and it blows me away the things that are done. I mean, we have companies that make different products and ship it overseas, believe it or not, for mining applications. That they actually bring in the plate steel and they're making it right there from scratch.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And then we have other fabrication shops that actually make make transformers. I'm like, ironworkers do that? They actually build the transformer. It's like, like a big tank. They actually do the windings for it, for the inside to step. Yeah. And then they fill it, they test it, they do everything. And these things go out all over North America. And it was done by ironworkers.
Yeah. I don't think I ever had the same job twice in the many summers that I worked with the ironworkers. So my shtick was stainless. I always had all my stainless tickets, right?
Oh, good for you. Man.
Right. So as a stainless welder, there was very fun jobs that I would get to do with the ironworkers, because most people don't realize that the ironworkers are not really that much welding. There's a section of ironworking that is welding related, but it's usually the subset underneath construction in terms of the erection, and you're just there to support the teams. right? Now, as a stainless welder, I was there for a lot more of the repair work. So going out to do a lot of more maintenance.
Probably a lot of turnarounds and
Yeah,
things like
yeah. And I really enjoyed it because it was never the same thing twice.
Yeah.
And I like night shift, and so I'd always be all over that 12-hour night shift job. And back then, there was always the LOA and the double bubbles and all that stuff. So I'd be doing 100 hours a week and just loving it. Like
Absolutely.
As a young man, it was a thing. And I tell people now, like, yeah, okay, so those jobs specifically, those could be portrayed as the hard and dirty jobs. So, like, I mean, those are the jobs that maybe some people steer their kids away from, saying, oh, you don't want your kids to go do these hard and dirty jobs. And then I have to remind them, okay, I did it for 3 weeks. I mean, the job is done in 3 weeks. So 3 weeks of work. And I took home $15,000.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know how you complain about that.
You can't. and that's, it's a shame because that's where our school systems have failed us as a society. And I don't know, Mike Rowe, if you dislike or whatever, but when he had his TV show Dirty Jobs, it was fascinating to see. And when he's done interviews, he's like, look, there's nothing wrong with getting your hands dirty and going to work. Yeah. And it's an honorable living and an honorable career to be able to have that profession and have that skill. And, I can tell you personally, again, I started out 4-year education, came over, and then I ended up in the union construction industry. And I was, doing safety classes. And, I'd be doing OSHA classes, OSHA 10s, OSHA 30s, and I'd be doing it for, first, second year apprentices. And, sometimes they would be doing 4-year apprentices with the 30, they've been in there. And I was always jealous, because for a number of reasons, Max. So, first off, I was salary, which was nice, right? But I wasn't making I was working all the hours and I wasn't nearly making the money they were making, even as apprentices at that time. And they were making, not only good money, they had a pay raise every 6 months until they became a journey person. Then they, when they got done, they had no student loans, and they were getting community college credit with their local community college that was giving toward their associate's degree, and they were getting all of this for nothing.
Don't even talk about the pension.
And exactly. and then at the end of it, you've got a pension. Yeah, and it's like, holy cow! And I'm like, I don't have a pension. I don't have a 401k. I'm like, wait, what did I do wrong? I'm still paying off student loans and everything else. So it's a shame because that's, again, our educational system is geared toward driving our young students into a college career or a college atmosphere and they're just automatically pushed that way. And if they don't seem to fit, then they get forgotten and they go on to other careers or do other things. But it's unfortunate because we've lost a lot of those vocational
and they
schools.
would have been fantastic.
And they would have been outstanding. I've got a nephew, and he loves to weld. I mean, that's all he wanted to do. So he went to Lincoln Electric, and he went through their welding program and spent 6 months up there and got all of his certs and everything. And he's like, that's all he wants to do. But he wasn't a great student, and he knew he wasn't going to go to college, but he knew he wanted to have a career in something. And I'm like, if we have anybody who's listening to this are young men and women. Actually, I think I have no idea what the average age of our apprentices now are, but it's not 18 to 25. No. You're pushing upwards to 30s and maybe even some in their 40s. But you get into that situation and you're like, if you're willing to put in the time and the effort and you're willing to travel, because that becomes a key part of it as well. And sometimes with families, that's a stressful part, and we can have a conversation on that too. But you could easily be earning 6 figures if you're willing to do that and put in that time. And right now, things are just going to explode with the work opportunities that are out there. Like I said, the infrastructure bill is one thing, and then you turn around and you look at all the capital projects that are available right now. Companies are sinking billions of dollars into expansion right here in the U.S. and Canada. It's not going overseas to do it. They're doing it right here locally. It's incredible.
With our steel and our machines and our consumables.
Yeah. And it's like, come back. We had everybody resign here the last 2 years during the pandemic. It's like, we need you.
Well, the pandemic, I just put a note I wanted to talk to you about that. Sure. How much that exposed the need for tradespeople in our society, not just from a great career, but from a necessity role, because, when the lights turn off and the things start to fall apart, there's only certain groups of employees out there that are going to be working indefinitely, and those are the tradespeople.
Absolutely. The tradespeople they're the unsung heroes in a lot of these things. And just like our healthcare workers, and again, they were unsung heroes. They really put themselves out, and they were short-staffed, short-handed, and overworked like absolutely. And so, like that, we had the similar situation for our trades because construction in a lot of areas was deemed essential. And as you pointed out, the industrial maintenance side of things was also essential because, like you said, when you flip a light switch on, you expect the lights to come on.
Yeah.
And, somebody did that.
Yeah.
When you put gasoline in your car, somebody was at a plant on a turnaround helping to make sure that blend was ready to go, whether it was for summer or winter, right? When prices were going up or down. Well, now, that's a whole nother story. But, you don't think about those things when you have those commodities. And it's like, no, there were some really hardworking men and women that did a lot of work to make sure that got to you. And whether that's, even there or even, just trucking and getting it there, right? The transportation side of it as well.
And then the maintenance of the transportation. And
exactly.
That whole wheel of manufacturing and build and then replenish.
The roads, everything else, keeping all these things, the roads and bridges open and going. And, here in the States, and I know, personally in the state of Ohio, we have, I can't remember how many thousands of bridges in the state, and there's so many of them where the engineers have gone out and derated those bridges, their weight capacities. That's done for a reason, and it means there's a problem. Yeah. It means we have to go back and fix this, right? But so it's like, if it's derated, that's a problem. And, I don't think people figure, they don't think they put that together. It's not just a word.
It's not just like a grade A egg versus a grade B egg.
It's 60% capacity. Well, okay. Well, what does that? How much is that?
That means it's 40% more likely to fail.
Exactly.
Think about it that way.
There you go. That's a great way to put it.
See how those odds feel now.
Exactly. And it's unfortunate because up in Minneapolis, that I-35 bridge that collapsed several years ago. They identified there were problems. They were using, some of had some wrong size plates, some other things that were done up there, and it was a tragedy. And that forced, even in, again, in the Cleveland, Ohio area, we had a similar bridge to that, our Interbelt Bridge. And actually, we were pretty fortunate that as soon as that happened, our engineers in the county and the state went out and started looking at this, and they're like, yeah, we got some problems. So we can put a few Band-Aids on it, but this thing's getting replaced. And thankfully that happened. And it's unfortunate that you have to have some of those kind of tragedies occur before, we get our regulators and our politicians in alignment to be able to make some of these investments for our infrastructure.
Well, that's some of the biggest headaches that exists. And I think that's often where unions have the most power, is because governments between levels, and if people don't know this, I hope I'm not bursting your bubble, but there's like no communication between levels of government. We may fantasize that, they're talking to each other and working things out, but they stay on their level and they work within their level. They don't tend to level up or level down. Every kind of level kind of works in their own bubble. So often things that get mandated, you'll hear like federal's going to do this. At the next level, they might not be their plan. And then by the time you get to the city, the local level, who knows what's going on or where the money went or what's happening with it. And it's really hard to lobby. It's really hard to get people to talk and say, okay, why is this happening? Well, then we need to go to the Engineers Association. Well, then we need to do this. And you need to actually bring in a whole different group of people to just get one project to kind of work its way through. The unions have that power because they have, number one, a vast network of resources, and they are also considered to be essential lobbyists. The unions work to represent their members' best interests, and that also includes with the government.
Absolutely, and even in with the type of work that's going on, it's also trying to get our governments, our regulators, to understand that there's best value contracting. So just because a company comes in from out of state or from out of town, it doesn't necessarily mean, and just because they're the low bidder doesn't mean they're the best qualified bidder to be able to perform the work. And we need those decision makers to have that understanding that just because it's a low price or a low bid doesn't mean that it's always going to be the best.
Yeah.
It means there may have to be a lot of rework done quickly down the road. Warranties may not be held up as a result. And the other thing is a lot of that investment, if you're hiring those local companies to be able to do the work, that money stays in your community.
100%.
Back to your economics and the velocity of the dollar and where that goes. So, that stays locally, whether it's in your restaurants and other stores and everything else that helps keep that community going. And those are also the same people, right? Because our building trades members, they're also outdoors people. They like to hunt, they like to fish, they like to do other types of outdoor activities.
And they like to order the pizza and buy the
Absolutely.
boat.
And they do all these things.
Yeah.
So that money that they earn gets invested back in their community. They're also heavily involved in their schools with their children. And they participate in the local school programs. They participate as coaches. Whether it's on the soccer team, the baseball team, or the midget football, or whatever the case may be, they're engaged in the community. And so when some of these companies come in that just simply take the money and run, so to speak, it hurts that community. And those are things that again, from that disconnect that people need to understand, and that's where the unions come into this. On the best value contracting. I think our unions have also got, on the political side, and I don't want to pontificate too much to that end because I'm a safety person, but I know, typically on the labor side, typically seems to be a little bit more democratic to the blue side, and the contractors a little more conservative to the red side. But I think the process that's happened, over the last decade or so is that, a lot of times there's been a little bit of a shift in those philosophies, and it's well, maybe we'll support the politician who is going to best represent our interests in the industry, and it may not always be red, it may not always be blue, and make those decisions accordingly to get the best value for their dollar. When they start investing those kind of funds.
And every area is going to be different depending on what geography.
Absolutely.
Some parts of the country will be much more heavily invested in certain industries. Right. So they're gonna vote what affects their lives the most. Right. And that's important to know, because that's also how you should look at how you buy. Right, because which one's going to affect my area the most?
Well, and that comes back on the safety and health side, right? If I use this analogy, if at the end of the week you get home and you're ready to go and buy that 12-pack of your favorite beverage, do you think about how many people were hurt or killed in manufacturing that 12-pack? Would it change your choices if you knew that maybe there was a catastrophic incident that hurt or killed several people to make that beverage? Would you maybe look at buying a different beverage? What about your automobile? If something happened to a certain product line, would you make your buying choices different as a result? And what is difficult is in the safety world and construction, our contractors are measured on their safety performance. And so they are selected whether or not they actually have a good safety program and safety policies, and that they made sure that nobody got hurt.
Yeah, it's not just a checkbox.
It's not just checking the box. They've got to live up to that expectation, and if they don't, then it's either penalties on that job site, or maybe they're not awarded the next job that may come up working for that other company. So it's crazy how kind of two-sided it is, when we look at that. And that goes back to your comments about the blood book, right? When we look at that and how things come around as a result of things that have happened. So.
Now, with your work with the Iron Workers now, what are some of the initiatives you guys got going on in terms of safety? So specific to your job.
So specific to my job, I mentioned our Foreman Fall Protection Training course. So that's a 4-hour course that we've done in a partnership with 3M Personal Safety. Usually, back in the day, 20, 25 years ago, there were a number of different personal fall arrest equipment manufacturers, and one of them was one that was very familiar in the construction market in the States, and 3M bought them.
Okay.
So it's kind of it's an easy connection to make to say everybody's familiar with this product, but 3M was also very good, and those companies that were under that had very good subject matter expertise. So they've
been in the game a long time.
They've been in the game. They know the industry. So they were trusted support subject matter experts that we could have to help us with that. So we've got this partnership. But it's the other aspect of it is because 3M is so large, and on their safety side, it's not just the fall arrest equipment. They have other product lines that they develop that we can also tap into those resources as well. But specific to this foreman fall protection training class, we've been working trying to help educate foremen of their role and responsibilities of handling safety and health on the job site when it comes to fall protection. And as we were talking before, you can't always, put up guardrails or do different things because we got to be at elevation and doing this work. And so we run into issues with this equipment not being used right. The harness has to be on, it has to be fastened, it has to be tight the certain way. The lanyard that you're connecting it with has to be in the right position, has to have the right connections, has to have the right gates. The anchorage point that you're going to be hooking it up to, or the lifeline that you're going to be hooking it up to, has to be set up properly and make sure it's not going to fail.
Right,
the cabling,
tension,
the tension, and everything. Everything.
Yeah.
And then you got the fall distance that you got to calculate. So you've got all these things, and it all has to work perfectly in order for it to save somebody.
Yeah, and that's before you turn on a wrench.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I don't have time for that. Well, how do you have time not to do that?
Yeah.
And so, it's real easy. And again, in the safety world, I've had to see that where the contractor who has had a terrible incident all of a sudden is willing to spend all sorts of time and money and resources to fix something or to take care of something, and yet it could have been done right the first time, and it wasn't addressed. So that it's kind of hard sometimes to see that and want to help, knowing that there's such a struggle with that. So our goal with this course is to try to help educate our foremen to understand their role in representing their employer. Even though they might be a card-carrying member of that local union, they still have, as a foreman or as a leader, a supervisor, they actually technically represent their employer, the contractor.
Yeah.
And so, it's a different twist. So the mentality has to shift a little bit.
A little bit more ownership there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's more ownership, and it's harder to prove supervisory misconduct than it is employee misconduct, right?
Right.
So what we're trying to educate our foremen with is, just some quick things as they walk through a project. I mean, like I mentioned before, they can identify quality issues, they can identify productivity issues, but on the safety side, we want them to be able to identify certain safety things quicker. And in a lot of cases, we may have people that might have been JIWs, journeyman iron workers, for 20, 30 years and have never gone back for any upgrading.
Yeah.
And so, technology has changed so much in that time frame that we want them to be familiar with the products.
That's a big throwback to the old style of training too, this idea of grandfathering, right? That is something that has, like, in my career, been a thing for a long time, and I hated it as a young person that was having to take all these courses, and then the people above me who had and they didn't have it, and then I felt like I knew more than they did because I took the course, and I know they didn't. But I think that's gone now. They're, like, the whole concept of grandfathering is over. Like, you just have to learn it.
Pretty much, or test out of it to a certain degree to be able to show competency that you can do it. Because again, you got certain liabilities that have to be, have to be met in order to stay relevant. So we've the class that we have, it's part classroom and then it's part hands-on. So that's the kind of the fun part of it, is then people are able to go out, work around some of these mock-up structures, see how all this equipment works, and get a better understanding of it. And so that's pretty rewarding to have that aspect. One of the other things that we do, Max, is in the safety department for the International, is we have what's called an Ironworker Safety Director training course. And this course is a week-long course, and it's all geared toward safety and health, and it's not an OSHA class. Like taking an OSHA 500 or a standards class. This is Ironworker specific. And what it is, it's really, honestly, it's the things that I probably would have liked to have had about 27 years ago, where somebody sat me down and explained how what a job hazard analysis is, or a job safety analysis. What's a pre-task plan? When you do these types of, when you know what your work is for the day, and you know the task, taking it in the steps and understanding what's going on and what you're going to be doing and that type of stuff. It's safety and health related, but we're taking our Ironworker members that have had time in the career, maybe they're getting closer to retirement, they're seasoned, or maybe they physically can't do the physical labor anymore, but their mind is still sharp and they know all the different things about the trade. So what a resource. And if we can help educate them on some of the things safety and health wise, that gives them the opportunity to be able to still stay in the trade or stay in the industry and hopefully help pass their knowledge on to others and keep people from getting hurt. So we run them through this course, and there's fall protection, there's crane and rigging, there's steel erection, there's some reinforcing, like I mentioned, the pre-task plan, job safety analysis, and then the class that I teach in this segment is, the module in this course is the record keeping and managing injuries and illnesses and that kind of stuff. And as a safety person, it's dry. I'm like, when I got that assignment,
how do you
years
hype
ago,
that up?
I'm like, I got to talk about OSHA record keeping for 4 hours with a bunch of iron workers. Can't you give me something else? And so I was like, all right, well, we'll try to make the best of this. And I'm pretty proud of it because my class actually was one of the higher rated classes that when they do the course evaluations, people came back and said, man, I really learned a lot in that. And it wasn't easy, but the instructor took time with me, walked me through it. So what I do is I walk them through how to fill out an OSHA log, teach them what a recordable injury is, teach them what a first aid case is and how that works, how to fill out an OSHA log, how to calculate incident rates. How do you calculate a DART rate? How do you calculate a total recordable incident rate? What is the fatality rate? How does all this stuff play out? And then I try to get them to understand, well, okay, I did it, but what does it mean? And so then how do I use it? So then I take them over to the Bureau of Labor Statistics site and I teach them how to look up on the charts what their North American Industrial Classification Code is. Typically for structural steel erection, I think it's 23812. And you take that information as you go across and you read the chart and you can see what your recordable rate is, your DART rate, and you can see where it is. Now you can measure yourself with your performance against that, and you've got a baseline. So now because that's the average, right? That's average, and that's what I try to point out. This is average. This means this is what everybody has submitted their data to the BLS. That means you're average. That's in golf, that's par, right? Yeah. So I mean, if I could ever get to that, I'd be so happy. I'd probably quit, sell my clubs, but it'd be awesome. Yeah. So so if I ever get a hole in one, I'm definitely quitting. That right there, I'm done.
You're done.
So, so we take that step and we teach them that element, but when we take it another step, what's an experience modification rate? This is how your insurance company rates your contractor, and they give you a rate. And this also affects whether or not your insurance is penalty rated or discount rated, and how much is that going to cost when you have to do this?
And it all works
and
down
the
line.
It all plays along.
Yeah.
And so then I take them to the next step is, if there's an injury, what are your direct and indirect costs from that injury? And that leads up to your total costs. Well, all of a sudden now, how much more work as a contractor do you have to successfully bid and complete safely to be able to pay for the cost of that one accident that you had on a previous job? And to me, that's where you get that aha moment, right? Where you see people after they've gone through this, they've done these calculations, and they're like, oh, well, $500 and you got to do an extra $200,000 of work for that $500 eye injury? Well, maybe that's why the contractor is always on my about wearing these safety glasses.
Yeah.
Probably.
And that's not even factoring time loss.
Exactly. All the lost time to, flushing it out and all these other costs. Exactly. So they're like, oh. And then you take the step and you go, well, if a contractor has a $10 million job, how much money do you think they made on that job? $10 million. No, it doesn't work that way. You're looking at what, anywhere between 1% to 3% of that, so, and that's if everything's good. And then I take the step and I explain, look, as a contractor, and again, I'm not picking sides here. This is educational. Let's work this out. Yeah. So as a contractor, you bid the job. If you're successful with the bid on that job, maybe of $10 million, that subcontractor, right? So, and especially in our industry, right, as an erector, okay, now you go out, you have to maybe you have to rent a crane, maybe a JLG, maybe scissor lift, maybe other equipment. That all costs.
Yeah, maybe the lot next door to stores rock and dirt. Like,
yep. And you got to pay for the transportation, work with your fabricator to get your material out there, have everything set up. And now you've got, your material costs. Now you got your labor costs, and now I'm paying my wages. I also have to pay my fringes on time to the local, right, to make sure that that's all done. So my health and welfare, my fringe, my pension, and everything else is being taken care of. And then we get done with the job, and it's completed, and everything's good. And now the contractor is waiting 60, 90 days, 120 days. Well, Mr. Contractor, your paperwork wasn't quite right, so you kind of need to redo this and send it back to us, right?
And that starts the clock all over.
And then you're starting the clock, right? And they're playing that game. So basically, these contractors that are erectors, and most of the other sub-trades are in a similar situation, they're basically financing a project at zero interest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what a savings, right? What a business model, And so
it's cutthroat.
It is very cutthroat. Yeah. And they're like, oh, well, so then what happens, right? The GC or CM comes back and say, hey, you know what? We can't pay you the full $10 million. We just don't have the money. Will you take 90%? And at this time you're, so far out.
And you're up against the wall.
You're up against the wall. You're like, yeah, I'll take it. Just, give me some money.
And what are you going to do? Fight about it in court?
Right.
Over what?
Right.
Yeah.
And don't worry about it. We'll get you on the next one. And
if they don't go bankrupt after the
exactly.
job.
And you're sitting there going, I am never going to bid for them again.
Yeah.
And son of a gun, what happens? That GC or CM gets the next job, and then it goes on from there. And so it's very cutthroat, and it's a challenging business. And a lot of times, where we see businesses struggle or fail, it's oftentimes in one, getting the paperwork done right to be able to get paid, and also making sure that they understand their contracts so that they are again working with their GC. They're aware, and they're working with their GC CM on that. And one of the cool things about the Iron Workers is we actually have what's called Impact. And that is our Iron Worker Management Progressive Action Cooperative Trust. And that program is a labor management program that's been set up through the Iron Workers, and it's kind of a sister program, if you will, for the Iron Workers and for our contractors. And what's awesome about it as a safety person is, our safety department, we answer to General President Eric Dean. So we have a direct line with him, and which is great, because that's how world-class organizations should do things, right?
Yeah.
Is the safety department answers directly to the president or CEO of the company, not
and you can move forward.
And you're a part, and you're also counting on operations to be a part of it. The safety department it's not all the safety department's responsibility on doing all this. The safety department is a support mechanism in support of operations and working with those things. So we have that aspect. But with the partnership with Impact, the safety department is actually funded through the Impact program.
Okay.
And by doing that, as a labor management cooperative trust, the safety department now has the role where we can service our members, our brothers and sisters out there, and help take care of them on safety and health issues. And that's our priority. But because of the impact and the funding coming from that side, and this is all very well thought out, we can actually support our contractors as well. And as well as our other stakeholders. So there might be owners, clients, and there's a buffer, and it gives us the same people in the department then can kind of serve two aspects of the industry where we're able to help support both sides of the industry. And usually in most cases we're on the same page especially on safety and health. And we're the only department that has that unique structure that allows us that flexibility.
Yeah, and those are the initiatives, and at the end of the day, like our association, so much of what we do is partnerships. Because actually, I think it was yesterday or this morning on one of the other podcasts we did here, is that you only have X amount of bandwidth and time, and sometimes you have these great ideas and initiatives that you want to, oh, wow, we had this great idea. This would be so fantastic if we could do this, but it'll cost us so much time and money. Why don't we maybe look to see if someone else is already doing this, and we can maybe just work together and come up with a plan together and use their expertise at something that they're great at and bring it in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so nice being able to develop those. And in some of my old jobs, we would call them like a strategic alliance, right? Maybe no money changes hands, but you've got a really good affiliation with another organization that has some like-minded principles. And it's about what's doing best to perpetuate the needs of the industry or to take care of the needs of the industry than it is, in coming back and forth. And even though they might have separate boards and separate direction, to have those kind of relationships is valuable. And
you live in the same ecosystem, right?
Exactly. That's what's so great about being in a program like this, because you start walking the floor, you start meeting people and networking a little bit, and you're like, well, I never thought about that, or I never realized that, or wow, that's really neat.
Or how do I
stuff.
fit in there?
Exactly. And so it's great, isn't it, to finally be back in person again?
Well, that's where I was going to go now for the next few questions,
Sure.
as we're coming up to the end of the podcast, your guys' booth and what you guys are doing here at the NASCC. What is it that you guys came here as like your little a mission statement for this show?
Well, so yeah, actually a couple of different ones. Obviously, we have our Ironworkers Impact booth, and it's really driven by our impact professionals that handle that. So we actually had 3 representatives here this week from Impact that have been networking, working with contractors, and also a lot of different exhibitors here with all their different booths. In my role, I actually was asked to come here and give a presentation this week on safety and health. So I was on the dais this morning and survived my presentation. And
you didn't do 4 hours?
No, it wasn't 4 hours, thank goodness. But we got through. It was a full hour, and I didn't realize it, but they actually had my session pegged for live streaming. So,
did it go out?
It went out. So we had about, I want to say around 60 plus people that were in the room. And then we had another 65, they told me, were participating online that were listening in and watching what was going on. So I thought that was really cool to have that flex.
Cool.
And it's amazing how, again, probably 3-4 years ago, most conferences would be like, absolutely not. Nope. You got to come here. You got to pay. You got to be a part of it.
It's the ownership part of it.
Yeah. And now it's like, well, okay, things have changed. Maybe we better open it up and use some technology and allow people that flexibility to participate remotely.
Well, what we've learned through the virtual sphere is that we found a whole new audience that we have inadvertently, through ignorance, omitted, right? Because we just didn't know. And, we expect people to come to us and to participate with us and to work with us. And the CWB is a giant company where, we have our fingers in kind of every aspect of the steel industry. But what we never thought about is the people in extremely remote areas, the people with disabilities, the people that perhaps financially there's no way they could afford to come to a conference like this, because it does cost money. And that doesn't mean that they don't have a deep love and passion for what we're doing. So when we opened up to the virtual sphere, we had people coming in that were like, wow, this is amazing. I didn't know you guys even did these things. And wow. And so now that we're going back face to face, it's like the pressure's on. Like, you don't want to open a door on someone and then close it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And we're seeing we're similar growing pains, right, with that, because one of the things that we did prior to the pandemic in the safety and health department is we were having what we would call a safety summit. And so we would go to district councils all over North America and bring contractors and our union members together and have a summit. Basically, let's talk about safety and health. And we'd pick a day and everybody would come in and travel and do all that kind of stuff. And we would sit there and try to address issues that were relevant in that geographic area. Because not everybody, you talk about one thing in California and New England, they're like, that's not our problem.
Yeah, it's not us. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, so it was able to kind of bring those things home, and that was really a benefit with it. So with the pandemic, we had to kind of shift our focus a little bit, and we put together what we called a lunch and learn series. And it was, the district council president would be able to make that choice if they wanted to participate or not. We would work with them, set up a date, and it was during the lunch hour, and it was just 1 hour. And we tried to do it unscripted, and some
Kinda
would try
keep
to
it organic.
Yeah, just keep it organic and have that ability for people to just kind of come in and just talk a little bit and not go through a lecture, not go through a bunch of PowerPoints and shove stuff in people's face, but what's going on in your area, and try to get people engaged a little bit. And we had some of the programs were more successful than others. But it opened up some doors and some opportunities where people were bringing things up. And, one of them in particular, in some of the areas, we had folks that were like, hey guys, obviously we know you're tracking a lot of COVID stuff. We know that we're trying to keep tabs on what's happening with our membership. And And honestly, with what we had reported back to the Safety and Health Department, it actually mirrored what was going on pretty much throughout North America, right? Just in maybe different numbers, but you know, when I put everything together on Google Maps and everything, and you pull it up, and it was like you could take the Google Maps of North America, U.S. and Canada, and then you'd put of the COVID rates, and then you put the Iron Workers, same thing, and you're like, yeah, it's about the same, you know, which was pretty relevant to have an idea of what was kind of happening. But then, you know, the other thing that they did is, you know, we knew about mental health issues in the construction industry prior to the pandemic. And I think the one good thing that kind of came out of the pandemic is it kind of made it a little bit easier to talk about.
And it gave it a time. Like, this is the time.
This is exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we knew, you know, the construction industry, Max, has one of the highest death by suicide rates of all industries. And so we recognize that, and this is going back many years now.
Yes.
So there was a group that came through CFMA, that was the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. There was a lot of players involved that started sharing and downstreaming information and trying to reduce the stigma associated with just bringing it up and talking about it, and talking about mental health. And then when the pandemic hit, it kind of exacerbated the issues because now it was, you know, alcohol and you know, opioids and, you know, all the other things that kind of went along with it.
And even the trauma of the cabin fever and the pandemic itself.
Everything, you know, because every time you'd flip on the news, it was something different, and it was always negative.
Yeah.
You know, all the rates are going crazy, and we're doing this. And absolutely, and it's an unknown.
Yeah.
You know, we really tried to, you know, not just the iron workers, but a lot of the trades really tried to focus in on some of those things and try to help say, hey, you know, here are some resources. And I was really pleased to see some of that kind of developing, and it actually gave us more of a foothold to have these kind of conversations. Because again, we're iron workers, we're type A personalities, we're going to go after things, and we're tough, and we're not going to talk about this. And meanwhile, the stress of travel, the stress of family life, and the other thing, especially when you're traveling and family life, and what's going on at home while you're away, and those kinds of things, all play into these things. So, you know, you've got all those kind of issues that people are dealing with, and no outlet, where do you go to talk about it? Where do you go to get help? So I was really happy to see, like, the National Suicide Hotline is now being nationally being made. You know, like we had 911, it's now a 988 number that people can call to get assistance more directly instead of trying to remember the long 800 number. And you know, something that the iron workers have done, again, that I'm really proud of, what's going on is, you know, when you look at recovery, right? Because all of us, and I'm sure as you were doing turnaround work, there was drug testing and everything else, right? And you had a policy and programs that was collectively bargained and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, we've had this now in our industry for over 20 years. And we recognized many years ago that recovery is a lifelong process. And at any point, there's that risk of somebody going back and sliding back into those old habits. So, you know, you come to an event like this, it's wonderful. Everybody's having a great time. We're all social. We're getting back together again. And you walk around the exhibit floor and there's bars set up. And you can go grab a cocktail and go walk around and look at this stuff and talk to people. Well, what about those that are struggling or have struggled with that? That's a temptation, right? That's right there in front of them.
Or they're struggling right here.
Or they're struggling here and you don't know about it. So
Yeah.
what the iron workers have done is, as at our conferences, in our meetings, we've actually put together a recovery meeting that's available. So in addition to a cocktail reception or in a dinner or whatever, there's a recovery area or meeting where people can get together in a safe environment, have those conversations, be able to network a little bit, and not feel that pressure and that kind of desire potentially that might take them back down a path that they fought so hard to get out of. And so I would love to see more of that kind of stuff happen at a lot of these different types of programs that just gives people that outlet, that venue to be able to have that freedom and make it easy to get to.
Well, any terrible event will have lessons to be learned. And this has been since the dawn of time. And this has been a hard couple years, but we very much need to take to heart the lessons we've learned. And that is the things that we have to care more about our fellow brothers and sisters.
Amen.
Just in general. We need to be more respectful of people's positions in life because you don't know what people are going through. And we also just need to be more aware that not everyone is okay. And that's okay. Like, it's just life.
Right.
Like,
right. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, you have that ability. You know, my wife, she picks on me sometimes. She goes, you walk around and she goes, people just come up to you and just talk to you automatically. There's something about you that people just open up like that. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what it is, but but I also try to pass that back along, right? You never know. You walk up to somebody that might be having a bad day and you say hello, or you hold the door open for them, or you do some simple act of kindness. That might change their whole perspective on something that might want them to do, and that changes their mind.
Yeah.
That gives them a little bit of humanity.
And you don't want to be the person that tips somebody in the other way for no reason.
Right.
There's nothing to gain from that, right?
That's right. That's right.
So for the conference, we've been talking about the time off now. What's your guys' plan now as the Iron Workers going forward? Are you guys going to be at every conference possible and really get involved? Is there going to be a kind of phased-in approach? What are you guys looking at in the next year?
Well, that's kind of hard because there's the safety department. Well, yeah, there are a lot of variables, but the safety department is a very small department within the international. We don't have the resources that maybe the training department does, because you have the training fund, and then you have all these apprenticeship programs throughout North America that kind of have a network. And we just have our staff of the safety department, and while we know a lot of people that are in safety, there's not really, in a lot of cases, maybe a dedicated safety person, or maybe there might be somebody at the local that teaches an OSHA class, but they're just teaching and it's no disrespect to them. They're an instructor that's not only teaching safety, but they might be teaching welding, or they might be teaching total station, or they might be teaching some other things.
Yeah.
And
it's not
their specialty, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a challenge for us. So we have to manage our time to the best of our ability, and it's hard because sometimes you have to say no. I would love to be there, but I've got other commitments, or we have other things that we need to take care of, and I have to be able to prioritize, and our department has to be able to prioritize. So right now, for over the next year, one of the big emphasis is that we're trying to deal with, aside from the programs that I've already mentioned, is offshore wind. That's becoming a real big, a real big motivator here, especially as we're looking at energy and all these elements, and so it's trying to come up. Well, how do we work on being able to staff these jobs? How do we make sure that we have enough people trained that are qualified to be able to go out and work on these jobs, whether it's on the port side or actually out on the ships and in these offshore windmills to work in these turbines and meet that demand. And that's if you've watched the news lately, you've seen probably some of these offshore leases that have been going on where these purchases have been made around the United States. I think back in February, there were some off the coast of New York, New Jersey. And then I think here a week or two ago, there were some out west in California that they were looking at some of those. So, some big bucks being spent. And I would venture that if they're making that kind of an investment, that they're going to be planning on moving forward. Which, of course, they got to get through all the permitting and everything else, right? All that red tape. But at some point, those things are going to be going out there. And obviously, the Iron Workers, we want to be there, but we need to get our folks up to speed. So we, in the safety department, have a responsibility in collaborating with our training department to work on putting together good programs, making sure that our training centers are up to speed to be able to offer these programs so that we can meet that criteria.
All right. Well, we've come up on the hour, and it's flown by. We've had a great conversation. So just in terms of, like, for the listeners, if you're interested in becoming an iron worker, they've been listening to you talk, and they're like, wow, this sounds like a great gig. What are you guys looking for? Is there work for iron workers everywhere? How do they get involved? What do they do?
We always can use iron workers. We can use, we are again, the work opportunities are there. And again, if you're not maybe fond of heights, there's other aspects of the trade that you might excel in. Maybe it is welding. Maybe it is doing rod work. Maybe it is doing some ornamental work. So there are definitely opportunities there. And if you like to work with your hands, it's a great career. So go to ironworkers.org. That's a great place to start. Look at the website. You can actually go through and actually look up unions in your area. And when you find those unions in your area, you can reach out to those local unions, find out when they're taking on new apprentices, and start working with them directly. And I will say this, be persistent. Be there, show up. Go get in there. I hate to say,
Get down to the hall.
Don't just make one call and say, "Oh, I tried." No, get up, get down there, and go do it. And also make sure you know how to set your alarm clock, right? Make sure that you know how to get up and be willing to go to work, because we need people we can rely on. We got to have people show up every single day.
And there's someone there to take your job if you're not going to show up.
Absolutely, but you will make a tremendous. And again, it's not just it's not a job; it's a career. Benefits, healthcare, pension. And I know when, depending on our youth, maybe they don't really care about those things as much anymore, right? So,
but they will.
But they will. And I mean, my daughter's like, "Yeah, Dad, I know." I'm like, "You got to do this,"
Yeah, I was like that too until you had a kid. As soon as that kid pops out, you're like, "Oh, damn."
Yeah, exactly. Where'd that money go? Where'd that go?
Well, what about doctors and medical bills?
Exactly.
And, like all these things that I don't want to worry about, right?
Right. So,
all right. Well, this has been a great interview. This has been fantastic. Do you have any more speaking engagements throughout the week, or are you kind of off the clock now?
No, well, I think I'm pretty well off the clock now. However, I do have some booths that I need to visit because some people have been wanting to connect with me, and I want to connect with them, especially on some products that might help on safety and health aspects. One of the other things on the health side is, we have a lot of iron workers that have hearing problems.
We were just talking about how deaf. So I already got approved for my hearing aids.
Okay.
So I'm waiting to get
You're
mine.
waiting to get them. Okay. See, so you're not alone. You're not alone. And so maybe we could look at some other technology instead of maybe using that impact driver. Maybe we use something that's maybe still torques, does everything, but it doesn't have to make that loud
100
noise.
decibels.
Yeah, exactly. Or we're actually wearing the hearing protection when we're doing it. So those are some things that, I think there's a part of it. And I will say this in closing here, everybody always says construction is a dangerous occupation. It's dangerous. I don't want my kid working in that. It's dangerous. Well, part of my philosophy with a lot of this is, it's only as dangerous as what we're willing to allow it to be. And in the union construction environment, a lot of times our workers are given that stop work authority to be able to stop and let's take a minute, step back, and let's make sure that we're actually doing this the right way. Let's think about this. And no company is really going to fault them for taking that opportunity to say, wait a minute, I don't know if this is right. Let's make sure first. And so I would really hope that we change and shift a little bit of that attitude toward it, not just say, yeah, it's dangerous and we expect people to get hurt. That's not acceptable anymore. I don't want to just allow people to get, accept that they're going to get hurt. No, we can actually look at this in a different perspective, say, no, if we take maybe more of a leadership role, and I think, again, that's something that maybe the pandemic has taught us, is being willing to step up, maybe step out a little bit more and take on a little bit more of that leadership and say, okay, I don't want to let this happen on my watch, that maybe we can help make a difference there in people's lives on the job site, and again, make construction a much safer industry where we'll want to have, our sons or daughters being able to come out and do this work, and again, build those monuments that we'll be recognizing for years down the road, and be proud that we were a part of building it.
Yeah, it's the future that we build, right? So, and well, thanks, Wayne. This has been fantastic having you on the show.
Appreciate it, Max. This has been great. I've really enjoyed it.
All right. And for all the people listening, thank you very much. I do want to do a special shout out for a very, very good friend of mine who just passed away, an iron worker from 771, local 771 in Regina. I've been friends with him for 20 years, and he died in a motorcycle accident about a month and a half ago. So, this is the Iron Worker Show. I wanted to send a shout out to Terry Sears, really great guy, and kudos to his family. And kudos to the Iron Worker Brotherhood that came out for his funeral, paid for everything. They raised money for his family, and they really came together, and I thought it was a really beautiful thing. People came from across Canada for his funeral. He was a very wonderful man.
That's awesome. What an honorable send-off, and may he rest in peace.
Yeah, so thanks, everybody, and stay tuned for the shows. We're having a lot of fun here in Denver, and, we're going to keep going. Another one tomorrow, so thanks, everyone. Take care, Wayne.
Awesome.
We hope you enjoyed the show.